Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I would like to call to order the Long-Term Care Redevelopment Planning Task Force meeting of August 10th, 2023. And we'll begin with the declaration of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations to declare? Seeing and hearing none, we can then move on. Madam Clerk, did you need a committee member attendance? Or did Okay, excellent. So with that, then we can continue with item number 3, which is the delegations. So this afternoon, we have Mr. Rodriguez here, and you are live, and I believe we can hear you. The technology is working. So with that, then, are there any staff introductions before we get started with the delegation? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, task force members. So we pulled this meeting together quickly to have an opportunity for all of you to understand and consider the selection criteria for the general contractors. And this was a little bit of a change because originally I think we had intended that there would be a meeting almost to award the selection, and I think this process will be better for everyone in that you're having an opportunity right now to understand what those selection criteria are, and everybody will be in support of those, so that our job as staff with the consultants will simply be then to ensure that those criteria are used appropriately in the selection process, and we can just keep things moving forward. So I'll turn it over to Andrew now, who will take you through just a little bit of an overview of where we are.
Thanks very much, Kim. So the main overview or summary that I'll be providing this afternoon is the committee report that was prepared by Kim and Randy and circulated to members, and summarizing the approach that we've put forward to pre-qualify the general contractors. So I just wanted to distinguish ahead. There's 2 separate processes. There's the ongoing tender for early works. That will be a separate contract, and it will be work that would be completed ahead. In order to separate in space and time the early works with the general contractor that will be responsible for developing the long-term care site. So where we're at in the project is we're working through some of the ministry approvals and finalizing the documents to be tender ready. But prior to that, we want to pre-qualify a pool of general contractors who are experienced and capable of completing a project of this scale and complexity. And so this is a process that is an open procurement process. It's acceptable and encouraged by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And so our procurement follows initially a pre-qualification process where we're looking to identify a list of 4 to 5 capable general contractors. Once we've established this pool, they would then be invited to tender later on this year. Once they've been invited to tender, the determination of who's a successful proponent is solely based on price. So this is the opportunity to ensure that the pool of pre-qualified contractors meet the requirements in terms of experience, in terms of personnel, and I'll be talking through some of those requirements. So the way the document has been prepared is there is mandatory criteria that any respondents need to submit and provide evidence and meet. This includes an overview of any pending litigation, workplace safety and insurance certificate, their ability to bond and provide insurance, which are clear requirements for any long-term care redevelopment project and ministry requirements. So we want to make sure that they have the ability to and the bonding capacity to meet those thresholds, and also the ability to provide sufficient insurance. Then there's other criteria in there in terms of knowledge with infection control practices, authority to bind from a contractual standpoint. And then we ask for information on no conviction or fraud or any potential conflict of interest. So assuming each of these criteria are met, we then move forward to the second stage, which is the rated criteria. And so you'll see in the proposed rated selection criteria, there's various categories. I'll go through a few here: corporate history and structure, project experience. Over here, we want to make sure and understand that they have experience in healthcare and long-term care, and also demonstrating some experience with projects that are either net zero or net zero ready. We're looking at key team members that they're proposing in terms of construction manager, as well as the construction superintendent and their alternates. We understand that at this stage they may have, we request that they submit a primary and an alternate, given that we're still a whiles away from tender and they can't guarantee these resources at the time being. So by having a primary and an alternate, it allows us to evaluate multiple options for who would be on this project. Construction quality, their approach to quality, infection control, and construction safety. As part of the pre-qualification package, we're also very clear in terms of how we will rate each of these. So in accordance with the broader public sector procurement directive, it's made very clear what is the evaluation method, what are the criteria, and what are the weighting, and that's fully disclosed to all proponents and any respondents for this opportunity. After this closes, we'll have a team comprised of members from the project team. So this would be from Grey County, from Colliers and Kasian. We would then be reviewing the submissions against the proposed framework and looking to identify, as I mentioned, a pool of 4 to 5 general contractors who would then be invited to bid on the project. This process of pre-qualifying would be open. So from the ministry's perspective, we have to advertise on the daily commercial news. We have to provide evidence of this, and we intend on doing so. We would be looking at a 4-week timeline from the time of posting, from the time of closing, with a question deadline 2 weeks after posting, and then addendum deadline 3 weeks after posting. In summary, that's the process and what we're looking to achieve with pre-qualification. I'll just pause here to see if anyone has any questions or comments with the overview or the report that has been prepared and circulated to members.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, then I'll just ask if there are any questions from any of the task force members. I see a question from Warden Mill. Oh.
Thank you, Chair Matrasov. Andrew, what's the advantage, and I'm sure there are some, to doing the process this way as opposed to qualifying any contractor that would bid on the project in one shot, so to speak? Because I understand why you're pre-qualifying, but I'm just wondering, you know, is there a demonstrable advantage to doing it this way as opposed to, I'll say, the traditional way?
Yeah, thanks for the question. In our experience, we always encourage this process to have it twofold. If we have an RFP out that's got qualitative and quantitative criteria for construction, it creates more complexity and areas of risk from the owner standpoint. This is a cleaner process where once you have a pool of contractors who are qualified, unless they submit a non-compliant bid, it's strictly on price. So everyone's on an even playing ground at that point, and it allows for a simpler, cleaner procurement process in our experience.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. As far as the pre-qualification goes, Andrew, it says up to one additional general contractor may be pre-qualified under the condition that they achieve a minimum score of 70%. Why would we limit it at only one additional? Would it not be in our best interest if more achieved a score over 70 to have as many people pre-qualified as possible?
Thank you. And another great question. So in our experience, there's two ends of the spectrum. If there's too little general contractors who are pre-qualified, then it makes it difficult to obtain best value for money and best pricing. But on the flip side, if there are too many pre-qualified contractors and they know they're up against, let's say for argument's sake, 8 or 10, then their odds of winning are lower and their interest goes down. And what we've seen is they often elect not to submit. So what we found is a sweet spot is somewhere between 4 and 5. in order to maximize or enhance the competitiveness of the opportunity. That's been our experience. We use this on other projects, and that was a logic bit between looking for a pool of 4 and 5.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the task force? Okay, I think that can, oh, sorry, Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just another follow-up question, Andrew. So as we know, there are a lot of these projects being done throughout the province. And is it a possibility we get a good pool, or the ones that we hope to get are busy or just too busy? And so how do you, like, is there a bit of an determination or sort of a bit of an understanding to say, our pool is not great or our pool is fantastic? Like, being there's so many projects throughout the province, there could be some that are just aren't interested because they got work for 2 years and they just can't bid because they just don't have the ability, and why bid if you can't deliver? So I just wondered, in your experience, is that an issue?
So the only way to answer this or to get the information is to move forward with this process and effectively test the market. We have time, in essence, to our advantage based on when we want to go out to tender. So if we look at the results and they're not satisfactory, there are options that are written in the pre-qualification document and that are available to the owner. In terms of the sector being very busy, those who will be building and seeking the funding that need to meet the August 31st deadline, that will be known in terms of their tender period and whether they've been successful in winning the contracts prior to our pre-qual closing. So I think we'll have a very good sense post the current wave what the status is and what availability contractors have. So I think this is actually a very good timing. If we had it at the same time as the tender period for this wave going through, then it would be subject to variability, but this timing bodes quite well given what's happening in the sector.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Greg.
Thanks, Chair. I should just ask, can you walk us through kind of the process which you utilize in terms of evaluating the scoring criteria? To some degree, it's nice to have a transparent recognition of how this is done. That said, I know that in the professional business, there can be a lot of encouraging others, companies to contribute a bid or show interest. But in terms of removing any sort of biases, anything like that, how do you work your way through the proposal and the scoring?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just give one example. So I failed to mention before the references. So we'd have a set of 10 questions for each member and each project to see how their performance was, anywhere from communications to deficiencies to quality to cost control. And this may override what's in their submission. For example, if a reference that they submitted provides does not concur with what was in their package or had a poor experience, the evaluation team would have the ability to adjust on some of the scoring. I'll use project experience as an example. We would ask that they submit at a maximum, 5 projects, and those 5 projects will be rated. They will use a standard form from the CCDC library. So each of them will be submitting their project experience on a similar form for the evaluators. And we've said clearly you must demonstrate that you have experience in healthcare and in long-term care in the province of Ontario. So for every project that meets that, they would automatically be assigned 4 points. If projects are fail to meet that, then they will receive 0. If projects demonstrate experience with net zero or net zero ready, they would achieve an additional 1 point. So that's the breakdown per project, and it's made clear to each of the proponents as part of the request for pre-qualification package. In terms of personnel, we're looking again for experience. We're looking beyond the company's experience with healthcare and long-term care. Does the construction manager and construction superintendent have experience with healthcare and long-term care? Do they have experience working together? So we have a graded framework that assigns points based on how well they demonstrate this, and this scorecard will be made available to each of the respondents. The idea here, if I can add, is that if you have 3 or 4 people rating it, it's very formulaic, and they would converge with the scoring.
Oh, did you have a follow-up, Councillor Craig? Okay.
Thanks, Andrew. So just could you demonstrate for me that, let's say there was a large construction company, a lot of these companies could be out of the GTA or the larger centers that have greater resources or greater experience. But if there was a company in Southwestern Ontario who had won or demonstrated that they had 1 or 2 builds, which were in the healthcare sector, but also that they indicated that they had successfully constructed 3 or 4 other large builds, which are not necessarily long-term care. Do you still consider that? You don't have any exclusion if a proponent was able to demonstrate 1 or 2 in their past experience?
Yeah, so that's not a mandatory criteria. It's rated. As long as they meet mandatory, we would move forward to the rated portion. So they wouldn't be excluded, but that would be factored into their scoring versus any other respondents. The other piece I would add is that if there are any respondents who are concerned with the scoring or are looking for any changes, this can always be raised during the question period, and that also allows us to test the market and consider any potential revisions to what was proposed, and we would do that formally via an addendum, so it's fair with any proponents.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the task force? Yes, Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Andrew, in your experience, is it typically the same group of companies that would apply for municipal or government-run operations as would apply for the private sector builds? Are we talking the same pool of builders?
Yeah, I believe so. That's been our experience and what we're seeing. We've seen the landscape change quite a bit with some of the larger contractors being tied up with multi-year, very large projects. We've seen recently also just interest in pre-qualification being lower than what we may have seen 2-3 years ago. And that's also a function of the sector at the moment and multiple projects in tender. But I haven't seen a key differentiation between a project that would bid for a municipal home versus a not-for-profit or a for-profit. So there's nothing in here that would exclude or attract a different type of contractor.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I don't see any further questions. Did you want to continue with any presentation, Mr. Rodriguez, or was that the conclusion?
I know that was it from my end. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for providing us with that, as well as the feedback on the questions that were asked. And so with that, Madam Clerk, did you want to a motion to receive the delegation, or did you want us just to continue because it's related to the report? Okay, so with that, then thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. We can then go on to the reports. So we do have the report CAOR RP 1223 selection criteria for general contractors. And the recommended motion that I'll look to get onto the floor is that this report regarding the selection criteria for general contractors for Rockwood Terrace redevelopment be received, and that the pre-qualification selection criteria be supported as outlined in this report, and that staff be directed to proceed and issue the request for pre-qualification prior to County Council approval as per section 26.6B of the procedural bylaw 5134-22. It is moved by the warden and seconded by Councillor Mackey. It's now on the floor for discussion. And Madam Clerk, could you just clarify for those of us that are getting adjusted to the procedural bylaw, the reason why we're able to do this prior to County Council?
Thank you, Chair Matrosovs. So in our procedure bylaw, there is a clause that where there is a time sensitive matter or something that isn't able to proceed to get that final ratification from County Council, that staff are able to proceed ahead of that time frame. So I'd look to Randy and Kim to clarify any timelines, but the understanding is that there is some time sensitivity to moving this through, and we don't have another County Council meeting until September 14th. So this is in the interest of moving things ahead quickly.
Okay, thank you for that. And so I'm going to look to the author of the report, Deputy CAO Schertzer, if you'd like to address that.
Thank you, Chair Matrosovs. So with respect to that particular matter, so in terms of the timing that we're looking at with respect to this RFPQ, we'd be looking to release the RFPQ subject to obviously the task force supporting the motion that's on the floor. We would be looking to release that on August 16th, so Wednesday of next week. And it would be closing on September 13th. From there, that's where, because we have this, as Andrew's outlined, this two-step procurement process, pre-qualification and then the tender. We're anticipating the tender being also released this fall. So to align the timing based on what we need to look at for this two-stage procurement process, that's why we're asking for the consideration of the task force to support the pre-qualification criteria as clearly outlined by Andrew as part of his presentation. So I won't get into any further details. It's outlined in the staff report. And like I said, Andrew's done a great job of outlining what we're proposing in terms of mandatory requirements, as well as the rated selection criteria. I will note as part of that motion that we are, the recommendation is that this selection criteria be supported in as outlined in the report, and that staff be directed to proceed to issue the request for pre-qualification prior to council approval. We'll also just highlight in terms of the pre-qualification of the general contractor candidates does not have a financial or resource implications for the county at this time. So County Council, of course, will consider the results of the early works tender for site preparation, which we heard in the previous committee of the whole meeting. That's scheduled as a meeting on August 31st. And then the tender proposal for remaining work, which the qualified general contractor will be responsible for, will be considered later this year. So that's when the financial implications of the overall project will happen. But in terms of the RFPQ, there's no financial implications at this stage. And be happy to take any further questions if task force has any.
Okay, so with that, we'll look for questions. So we'll start with Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks very much, Randy. So as far as being able to drill down into where some of the actual costs are going to be, when will the committee and council get more, site works, for example, when the tenders come in, is that when we'll be able to drill down into where some of the actual costs are? Previously we heard about, key fobs being, $3,000 a door. Like, when will we get some of that detail, I guess, to have a better sense for, we approved a big dollar amount, and if we can, get that down a little bit, I think everyone's appetite would be satisfied. But right now, if asked the question, it's very difficult to be able to say this is where the dollars are going. So I guess I'm just looking for, when will some of that information be more readily available?
Thank you for that question. And we'll see the results or start seeing some of the results of the total project costs when we see the early works tender results. as well as obviously when we see the tender results from the tender process, which is the second stage of the general contractor process. So that's when we'll see the actual numbers. From a staff perspective, we're also hoping that we'll see some costs that are less than the overall total project costs. And no doubt from the early works and the construction costs, those will be less than the overall total project cost, because that's the total project cost. That's everything included in that cost. Everything from furniture and equipment to engineering fees to consultant fees to architect fees, permit fees, etc. So those are all built into that $96 million number. So the actual contractor, the GC contract, as well as the early works contract will of course be much less than that. They're components of that overall total project costs, but we won't actually see the total numbers until we see the tender results from both of those tenders.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Councillor McQueen.
This could be more other business, but I think it's very important as we move through this process when we do our delegation at AMO that how close we are. Right. I know we talked about that, but I think we have to really emphasize that, because whether that's $30 million or whatever that is over the project's life, that's sort of key. It's sort of a real big important part. And I don't know if Andrew has any or anybody has any information of that extension of that funding for construction in the ground by August 31st, but we're really close, right? So I don't know if anybody else had any comments, but I think that's sort of that's, you know, maybe that's one of those ones, Councillor Mackey, we show up in a bit more numbers in the sense that this is so important for Grey County and that funding. I don't know if there's other comments.
Thank you. Andrew, I will turn it over to you in a moment. I know there was a recent meeting with Advantage Ontario and Prince Edward County and some homes there that were undertaking that advocacy. We are very close. That was part of the reason why we asked to keep going forward today with this motion, so that we can continue to demonstrate to the province that we're very committed. Andrew and his team have done a great job of making sure that the province has been advised every step along the way as we progress through all of this. But Andrew, I'll leave it to you because you're seeing lots of projects besides this one.
Yeah, that's a fair and accurate summary there, Kim. We're seeing other operators or organizations also putting pressure for an extension because of of where they're at, and they may be off by a few weeks. So I'm aware of several organizations, several of which you've named, Kim, who are in a similar position and are asking. That being said, I haven't seen any policy or anything written suggesting that there's some leniency, but all I can say is that there's a lot of pressure from several operators and other groups to consider that. We've been very forthright with our ministry contacts who are reviewing the technical drawings, so they're well aware of the modifications that have been made in removing the village square and assisted living. They've provided some comments on our resubmission, so we're actively engaging with them. We're getting feedback, which is allowing the design team to progress with their activities. However, we don't have anything written yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Follow up, Councillor McQueen.
Just a comment back is, I think we need to very much include our local MPP in this delegation. If there's any time for Rick Byers to pull up his socks, this is one of those things. And I think he's been at it for over a year now. And I think it's very important that we work really closely with Rick and to also help us put that pressure on. Thank you.
MPP Byers has been invited, and so he does have the delegation in his calendar, and I did commit to providing him, similar to council members, of the delegation briefs, so he has our materials as well.
Okay, follow up, Councillor McQueen.
Two things. Yeah, I think if us as individuals can have a conversation with Rick, and also Mr. Saunders, who's also represents the Blue Mountains, which is part of Grey County as well. I know we have two representatives and we're certainly unique that way, but I think we got to pull all the strings that we can, not pull the strings, but inform but this is very important.
Thank you. Yeah, and indeed, I think in this particular case, it's more appropriate that we follow through with MPP Byers because Rockwood Terrace sits within his jurisdiction, but certainly MPP Saunderson and I have regular conversations with regards to the need for long-term care in this region. So it certainly would help if the more voices that are singing in unison, the better for the greater good of the entire county as well. That if we can provide places that are in one jurisdiction, well, that means that it's going to release the pressure in another jurisdiction. So it's so very important that we do that. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, no? Is that a hand up, Councillor McKay? No? Okay. 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 In that case, then, now I think we had our mover and our seconder already. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, we can call the question for this. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right. So that concludes the business that we had. We didn't have any other business scheduled. So in terms of next meeting dates. Oh. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I know there wasn't any other business declared at the beginning of the meeting, but after some of the discussions, and in light of the fact that we're having a joint meeting with our friends from West Grey, I'm just wondering about the rest of the site down there. I'm not sure what West Grey's plans are or what the county's plans are, but there is an opportunity both with the old Rockwood and with some of the surrounding properties, you know, to maybe make it subdivision ready to be able to sell to a developer, which would help alleviate maybe some of our costs. So I'm not sure if it's premature to start thinking about that, or when should we start thinking about what some of the options are for that additional property.
Thank you for that question through you, Chair Mattress. Part of the early works for the proposed Rockwood Terrace project is also to look at supporting future development. So that's where we work closely with West Grey staff to come up with a servicing that would not only serve the needs of Rockwood Terrace, but also serve the needs for future development, including the lands that the county owns, the 20 acres that are east of Rock Street, as well as other lands surrounding the road extensions and the servicing works that are being proposed. I think my 2 cents worth of the stage would be that following the early works and following the award of the early works, if council, both Grey County Council and West Grey Council decide to proceed with those early works, I think that's the opportunity to start then looking at what are some of the potential options for those lands, and then having subsequent discussions with our respective councils in terms of what do we need further to make those as shovel ready as possible. Having the services and the roads in the ground, that's going to be a big thing in order to make those those lands more shovel ready. But I think it's worth having a bit of a longer term plan that works for both West Grey and Grey County in terms of what makes the most sense for the lands in and around those areas. And so that's something that I think we could be bringing back forward to our respective councils following that early works. Obviously our focus and our priority has been getting this project underway and what's required for Rockwood Terrace in order to meet our timelines. But once we have some of those pieces in play, then I think that's the opportunity to start looking at that and having some further discussions with our councils.
Okay, thank you. So if there's nothing further, I will therefore then turn our attention to our next meeting date. So we will, on this topic, of course, be having our joint meeting on July 31st with the Council of West Grey as well. That will be completely virtual. And in terms of this task force, is there an anticipated next meeting date? Not off the top of our head. Okay, so we'll keep posted on that. All right. With that, then I'll look for a motion to adjourn that this task force for the Rockwood Terrace redevelopment be adjourned at 2:43 PM. May I ask for a mover? Thank you, Councillor McQueen and Councillor Hutchinson. Seconds, and any discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.